Good morning. I'm Jim Spaniolo, Chair of the Search Committee for the Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion position. And it's my pleasure to introduce the second of our finalists for this inaugural position today. And so I want to give a warm Texas welcome, and I say that in quotes, to North Texas welcome to Marquita Booker, who comes to us today from Austin, where it's just as cold there as it is here, where she is the Associate Vice President for Inclusion and Equity at UT Austin. So we're after our presentation this morning, there'll be an opportunity for question and answer, and we will moderate that through the chat feature of our program here today. And Katie Hageman will be our moderator, and we have 45 minutes together this morning, and we want to make the absolute best use of that time. So, Marquita, thank you very much for being with us. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jim. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So, I am Marquita Booker. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and before I get into the substance of my presentation, I would like to take a few moments to talk to you just a little bit about me and my background and kind of what I bring to the table if I am the individual selected for this amazing opportunity. So I am a Black woman born right outside of Savannah, Georgia. Although both of my parents are veterans, retired Army, so I grew up moving all around the world. And it was this exposure to different cultures and identity that really gave me a deep appreciation for our differences, but how our differences connect us as human beings. I'm also an individual with a medically disabling condition. I was diagnosed with lupus about 7 years ago, and that has further stretched and expanded my empathy for groups that are vulnerable in those areas. I am an advocate at my core, at the heart of who I am, specifically for oppressed, underrepresented, underserved, marginalized, and in many respects, historically brutalized communities. That is who I am at my core, which led me to my law career, where I worked in employment and education discrimination law. And while I found that completely or totally rewarding, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for the law, I found for me that I had more satisfaction and passion for working directly with institutions and organizations to shift culture and climate. And so I transitioned my work into education because I do feel as though education inequity and disparities are one of the premier civil rights and human rights issues of our time. So I started my work in pre-K through 12, and initially, my role was to focus on getting Black and Brown students ready for colleges and universities. But through that work, I found that in many respects, colleges and universities weren't ready for Black and Brown students was the issue. We weren't prepared to be invested in their success and what that looked like. So I transitioned my career again into diversity, equity, and inclusion in higher education, which is where I've been for about the last 6 or 7 years. So that's a little bit about me and how I show up in the world and how I would show up in this work. So in putting my presentation together today, what I wanted to talk about was the person I've been asked to speak about pursuing inclusive excellence and what my initial vision and ideas and thoughts around this work would be. And in doing so, the first thing I thought about was what would the VP's role in all this look like? Like, what is that responsibility? So in looking at the job description and doing my own independent research and talking with a lot of campus members thus far, so the vice president, in my estimation, this role needs to be a boundary spanning role, which means that it needs to not be relegated to a particular office or function, but really integrate throughout the campus community to champion diversity-themed change as a shared priority, a top priority for leadership and shared governance at all levels. And what does that look like in action? So I see the vice president's role as first one that forges unity of purpose and action. So university life is especially in such a large institution, is federated, and decisions are made at different levels, and we all have our own initiatives and programmings and objectives and agenda. So the vice president's role in this work is to really create an aligned unity and shared purpose and implementation for this particular work. And it's really about, again, creating clear parameters and expectations, but allowing for flexibility and fluidity and joint determination into how we get things done around this work on campus. Sustain momentum. So, there takes a lot of energy to excel in this work. And the VP's role is to keep that energy, to keep diversity, equity, and inclusion at the forefront when it's no longer popular in the media, where it's no longer trendy or the hot topic of the moment. And I have found that in many respects, our student body, especially in higher education, take on the brunt of that work. And while I commend the students and they inspire me, that's a lot to take on, and also worry about your academics. And believe it or not, we know that you all have a life outside of school. So the vice president's role is to take on that momentum and make sure that this remains a shared, a top priority. Speak truth to power, which I think is one of the most important. And so if I was selected for the vice president's this opportunity, I will not only speak the truth to all levels of power as I see it, but really the truth and the facts based on what I have gleaned from our campus community and the city of Arlington, those that we are responsible to serve. So to always be vocal and honest about where we are and where we want to be. So I'm thinking about a vision for this new office, the Office for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. I came up with a few concepts that really resonated with me. So the office should and will cultivate and sustain a university-wide culture that embraces the inseparable connection between excellence and diversity through strategic action and partnerships, policy development, and innovation. The office will shape UTA's future to one where all community members are affirmed and belong. And I purposely use the terms affirmation, or the concepts affirmation and belonging, because I think it's the next level of inclusion. And what I mean by that is, when I think of inclusion, it's like you're an invited guest, you're welcome, and it may be very accommodating and hospitable, but you never quite feel like it's your own. So I really want to work on creating a culture where each of us feel affirmed and that we belong and that we don't have to assimilate or acculturate or leave the best of ourselves and only bring certain dimensions of ourselves to school and to work. So that would be my vision for this new office. And the mission is to support the university's strategic priorities and aspirations for academic excellence by providing diversity, equity, and inclusion expertise, tools, data, and programming that inform and shape every aspect of the university. So I've often found in my work that we have some well-intentioned people, but they don't know where to start. They don't know what the law requires. They don't know what they are permitted to do or not. We're not operating under the same set of facts. There is, information that is scattered abroad. So my goal is to have this office be a source of shared information, that truth and that fact that we can build upon that will touch every aspect of how we operate. And the purpose, the why of it all is to improve teaching and learning outcomes, facilitate mentoring and professional development, increase the dissemination and application of knowledge, and build and preserve vital community partnerships. So make sure that we have mutually beneficial relationships outside of the doors of the institution. So I know you probably all thinking that sounds great, but how are we going to get there? What is it going to take from us as a university, as an institution, to move in this direction? Well, the first thing is intentionality. Serve purposefully, adopt an anti-racism, anti-discrimination, equity-minded framework, and to act methodically and urgently. And so what does this mean? This means that in order for us to cultivate true change, we have to do so. It doesn't happen haphazardly or by happenstance. We have to act on purpose and deliberately. And when I say anti-racism and anti-discrimination and equity, that means we also have to move beyond the do no harm approach to discrimination and be very active in our policies, our processes, our procedures. It requires action on our part. While I understand that we have to act, cautiously and take our time and think things through, and there's quite a bit of bureaucracy that comes with working in higher education, we cannot let that in any way hamper our that sense of urgency that this work is a now type of work. Accountability, active responsibility, a university-wide commitment, and ongoing assessment. So active responsibility, again, is going to take more than us just acknowledging, our deficiencies and our shortcomings, but have accountability in action. What changes are we prepared to make? What are we prepared to do differently? How are we prepared to think outside of the box? And a university-wide commitment. Whoever you all select as this VP, as dynamic as they may be, cannot get the work done alone. It's going to take a university-wide commitment, all of us, to engage in this work in really meaningful ways. And ongoing assessment, we have to constantly look at who we are, what we're doing, and how we're doing it. There is no one-size-fits-all approach to this work. So it's going to take a level of continuity that I think that we may not have ever engaged in before. Transparency, truth and reconciliation. We have to take a really hard look and be really honest and have some really honest and hard discourse around our history, not just as an institution, but just higher education in general. And what we can be doing, what we're doing well, and what we can be doing better. Evidence-based reasoning is going to be critical. So the data, the facts, the information, and I mean not just from a numbers perspective, but also quantitative. We need to hear your lived experience in order for us to make the best decisions for the institution. And multiple mechanisms for information sharing. Many times we'll send out like this blast mass email with pertinent information buried within it, and you can miss that. And we need to have multiple excuse me, mechanisms for disseminating information and also for receiving feedback. Okay, so those are some of the guiding principles that I think that will undergird everything that we do moving forward. But there's also a lot of planning and processing that comes with making transformational change. So I thought I would outline for you briefly what my approach to strategic planning is. So first we have to ask the question, where are we from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective? So that requires an environmental scan, climate surveys, doing a diversity, equity, and inclusion inventory to kind of gather all of the resources and the work that we're doing across campus and really assess, have an honest conversation about where we are as an institution. Where do we want to be? So once we have our overarching vision, what are our vision imperatives? So what are our objectives and our goals and our short-term visions, but also our long-term vision for ourselves? Then after we have set our vision imperatives, we want to move on to how are we going to get where we say we want to be? What are our goals, strategies, tactics? What resources will it take? How are we going to get all of this done? And last but not least, how are we going to get there? How are we going to measure our process? Scorecard, deliverables. It goes back to that accountability and that transparency. What do we need to, what milestones or markers of success do we need to track in order to know that we are actually moving the needle in this work? And I think that is the harder part. We can set these lofty goals, but we have to be able to hold ourselves accountable, delegate responsibility for certain components to where it needs to be, but also maintain and sustain a coordinated, again, that university-wide effort to meet our goals and deliver on our promise as an institution. And this is actually more of a circular process because it's ongoing. And once we've developed in one area, the work continues. So we are always redefining and redesigning and assessing ourselves, and again, holding ourselves accountable to the service that we hold so true to the core of higher education. And with that, I will open the floor to some questions. And yeah, so thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much, Marquita. So we'll go to the questions.
Okay, thank you, Marquita, for joining us today. We'll go ahead and start with the questions. The first one is, other than compliance and physical accessibility, what would conversations of diversity, equity, and inclusion for people with disabilities look like under your leadership?
Thank you. That is a great question. So I'm of the opinion that we have to have a universal design learning principles. And that means that we afford as many options as possible for our individuals with medically disabling conditions. So that comes in the form of how we deliver our content, being really creative about not just, lecturing or now having Zoom meetings, but consider visual aids, podcasts, any kind of digital way to provide our content, infographics. I mean, creativity. You know, let's move beyond just just putting out information in one medium and mode. And also, we need to be more open about how we receive information. Like, how are we checking progress and feedback, and this we need to be open to having folks to gauge assessment in many different ways, and check in and be really fluid about our process. And I think also having disability being more visible and representative. I think there was a study by the American Research Institution that says that only about 36% of our individuals with medically disabling conditions complete their 4-year degree in within 6 to 8 years of entering the program. So there's a deficiency there that the institution needs to do a better job at, again, beyond the accommodations process or physical accessibility. And I think also training and making specifically our faculty more aware of what their mandates are, not just legally, but for advancing a culture of inclusion. I have found in my experience that for the most part, faculty are really open to accommodating the needs of a student in the classroom, but we do have quite a few that are resistant, and they make the process so hard and intimidating. And so we need to have training around that, and also accountability around that, and really engage. At UT Austin, we have really robust students with disability services department, and we have kind of counselors or consultants that work with each of our college schools and units to make sure that we are providing a high level service and not making people feel wrong for expressing a need. So those are just some of my thoughts of how we can be more inclusive of those with disabilities.
Great, thank you. The next question is, what makes UTA the best for you to continue your career in higher education?
Yes, so I did a lot of thinking about that, especially since, we've kind of been locked down for COVID, really thinking about what my next career move will be. And I have learned and grown tremendously at UT Austin over the last 2.5 years, and have accomplished and challenged myself in ways that I didn't know I needed to and didn't know were possible. And I think at this point in my career, I'm ready for a leadership position that would allow me to apply my fervor for diversity, equity, inclusion, for racial justice to a holistic framework. And UT Arlington is the most diverse of our 14 institutions in the UT system, with being a Hispanic serving institution, just over 25%, and Hispanic Latinx, and approximately 10 to 15% Black student representation. And there's a lot of room for growth and to continue to stretch myself to ensure that our faculty here is as reflective of our student body and the diversity in the DFW area and beyond. I have the heart for this work, more importantly, because sometimes it can be thankless and it's ongoing, and you don't see change as quickly as I would like to. And I have developed that stick-with-itness, if you will, to continue in this space. UT Arlington is also over half female, and I think there's just power in women and all that we bring to the table, and energy and a synergy around women empowerment, that we can do some really great things in this community. And also UT Arlington is very community oriented. So all the work that we do is right for community-based learning, where it's a mutual benefit for us as learners, but also to reach out and give out to our communities. So that's in a nutshell why I am attracted to this role and think that we collectively can do some really great work.
Okay, the next is the person wrote, I have recently watched UTA repeatedly fall short of excellence, and I worry that maybe we aren't hiring the best people for the job. What criteria do you follow for selecting the best, and how will you ensure that that is what we get?
That's a great question. For me, I'm always a needs-based. So whatever role, whatever job, whatever opportunity, it's meant to fill a particular need. And so I think in many times we get so caught up on what's on paper when we're selecting folks, but we don't take an opportunity to kind of connect to who they are and how they can meet the need that transcends, the check boxes. I think we have to, in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, make it imperative that having an equity-minded framework is just as key as having all the other qualifications that we say we need. And what demonstrated commitment to that work in whatever realm, whether you're in the classroom or outside of the classroom, how have you advanced that work? Have you engaged in mentorship? What are your research and scholarships endeavors? What are you passionate about? What kind of community civic engagement? So I think that taking our time and being more thoughtful and deliberate in what is important to us. I think casting a broader net when it comes to our recruiting channels and who we are reaching out to. I've also found in higher education specifically, we don't really have a talent acquisition team. We post a job on a job board and hope for the best, and that is going to require more work. Again, that active accountability and active responsibility to hire the best. And again, ongoing assessment when we get folks in the door. Are they having an ongoing connection with them to see how they're doing and what, if there's anything we as an institution can be doing better to equip them for success. So it's a two-way street.
Okay, the next question is, if chosen, how will you prioritize diversity, equity, and inclusion, or will it be a package deal?
I'm not sure I understand the question, but I think if I'm hearing correctly, that diversity, equity, and inclusion are distinct concepts. However, they do work in tandem together. So diversity is, it's about just getting differences into the institution. So making sure again that we have a representative student body and our faculty and staff. But it's also about what community partnerships we are making, what resources are we bringing in to support the diversity that we have worked so hard to cultivate. Inclusion for me goes back to that sense of affirmation and belonging, and equity is fundamental fairness. So it isn't a package deal as in one and done, and we have to pay special attention to each area, and one will build off of and support the other. So I prioritize them all equally. I think representation is important, but it is certainly not the end all be all. It's not enough to just have a group of diverse people in the room. It's really about how are we embracing, celebrating, and utilizing our identity diversity and our cognitive diversity. So I prioritize them equally. You can't, for me, you can't really have one without the other. Certainly not over the long range, long-term success in all of these different constructs. And though, you know, I will spend probably the initial period of really knowing what our pain points are as an institution. You know, where are we falling short and we need to take immediate action? Is it in our policies, in the equity framework? What are we doing for outreach for our diversity, inclusion? How are decisions being made? How do we engage with one another? So really working with the campus community to set priorities and to set standards as to where we're most vulnerable and where we need immediate work and need to take immediate action. That will be how I position my first, you know, initial period if I am selected for this role.
Okay, the next question is, starts with the statement. You used a great phrase in your letter, diversity maturation continuum. The question is, have you developed this continuum so that it can be used during the environmental scan and scorecard steps of your strategic plan process?
Absolutely, that's a great question. Thank you. So yeah, so when I talked about the strategic planning in my presentation about the where we are component, you know, are we still at equal opportunity compliance framework for how we do our work? And if so, that's okay. That's a good place to start. That is the fundamentals, the baseline of what we do. But then how do we now take that, make sure that we have sound policies, practices, and procedures around that work, and then build out diversity, equity, inclusion from there? Or are we at the other end of the continuum where we are all ready to go? We're fully embraced in inclusive excellence. We have diversity, equity, and inclusion reflected in our scholarship, our teaching pedagogies, our research endeavors, our community outreach. I mean, if that is where we are, then that's amazing too. That gives me a lot to build off of. So that goes back to yes, or we could be somewhere in between. Or being such a large institution, some areas we may still be at compliance, and others we're at inclusive excellence, ready to go. So I'll spend a lot of time assessing our climate and again taking a really candid look into what we do and how we do it to determine kind of where we are. And a lot of that is going to come from feedback from you all, the campus community, engaging with me and letting me know kind of where we are, and again, where our pain points and where we need to do maybe a complete pivot, and where we're strong and we need to continue to cultivate and harness that energy there. So absolutely, there's there's a lot of information gathering that will come into play to move the needle and determine kind of where we are in that continuum.
Okay, thank you. The next few questions are related to your role at UT Austin. The first one is, how does your role at UT Austin inform your vision for UTA? Can you compare and contrast the work at UT with your expectation? Yeah,
my work at UT Austin, I've learned so much. We have a really vocal student body. I never have to guess what is important to them or what they want, what they need. They let us know in no uncertain terms. I have built a trusting relationship with our student body and within our division for diversity and community engagement, which is what department I'm under. we take great pride in maintaining our connection with our community. And I anticipate having a lot of that same connection, and that the student body here at UTA being as sharing and, making sure that I do my part in cultivating that trusting relationship where I can be honest with them and they can be honest with me. And we don't always agree, but we can always move forward together in a meaningful way. I have learned to work within complex, again, federated system. There's a quote by Martin Luther King Jr. that says, "Effective leaders don't search for consensus, they mold it." And so I have really had to learn to stretch myself in that regard. I made the mistakes early on in my career. I had this fancy title, and I just came in and did what made all these sweeping changes. And it was a disaster because no one likes to be dictated to. And I certainly don't have all of the answers. So I have learned that that collaboration and listening, and then making decisive decisions based on that information is going to be key. I think one of the differences is that UT Austin is, by it being the capital of the state and the flagship institution, and having the state government literally in our backyard, I can look out my office window and see our state house, which is symbolic in a lot of ways of their looming presence and influence and impact, and we have to guard against that and push through that in many ways. Texas is a conservative state, and Austin is, my supervisor often says that we are this very liberal space within a relatively conservative city, and we have to push through a lot of barriers to taking action in, again, anti-racism and our LGBT community, supporting them. But those are battles that I may not always win, but I'm certainly always going to fight. From me working in DFW before, and my work at the University of North Texas, there's still that tension, but it isn't as palpable as in Austin. And I have learned to kind of negotiate and navigate around some of those external constraints as well. So I'm excited about the change, the possibility of the change. I think it'll be amazing there's a great culture here, certainly a more diverse student body, which is a lot to work with. We are moving in that direction at UT Austin. I think we hit 25% Hispanic and Latinx just last semester. But we have a lot more work to do in our student body diversity. I think UT Arlington is ahead of us in that way. But again, all of it is exciting, and I'm optimistic about coming in and kind of learning the lay of the land and what UT Arlington has to offer and what I can and to offer you all. So I think it'll be a great continuation of the work that I've done thus far.
Katie, I think we have time for one more question.
Okay. So building on the last question, can you describe your work on a specific project at UT Austin that has provided diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah, so most recently, one of the initiatives that I am most proud of is the institution of our Center for Restorative Practices. And as you all, I'm sure you all know, that so much of our culture is shaped in that that gray area. So it's not a legal violation or a policy violation, but it is harmful and it needs to be addressed. And prior to instituting restorative justice, we really had no place for that. So we've created a really open space for parties injured or who have been harmed. And I'm not talking about the institutional harm, but I'm talking about the harm to the person, where we create avenues to address and educate and for people to speak candidly and openly, and we can tailor solutions and remedies that meet their specific needs. And we have already had, and again, I was reticent about how RJ could work in with some of these deep-seated issues, but having that open dialogue and making it about the individuals harmed as opposed to just focusing on what we need to do from a liability aspect as an institution has already started to, we've seen tremendous gains in inclusion and around like the harm of, having and being so embracing of First Amendment, free speech, academic freedom, but leaving space for people to say, yes, you can say whatever you want to say, but, within within limitations, but your words have harmed me in this way. And so where do we go from that? And so that has been an amazing tool to shift culture and something that I would consider bringing to UT Arlington. So that's just one of the most recent that we've done.
Marquita, we're running out of time, but this has been thank you for your thoughtful presentation and a great dialogue that we've had a chance to have this morning. Let me just ask you if you want to make any concluding brief comments before we conclude this session today.
Yeah, I would just like to thank you all for listening and considering me for this opportunity. Again, I have not only the head for this work, but the heart for it. Most importantly, I have dedicated my entire professional career and to this work and beyond. It matters so much to me. And I would consider it a huge honor and a privilege to work for you all in advancing diversity, equity, inclusion at UTA. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Marquita, for your commitment and your interest, and it's great to have you with us virtually today. Let me just say to everyone that we are making recordings of each of the presentations of the finalists, and they will be available within 24 hours after the presentation has been made, so that for anyone who didn't get a chance to see these excellent presentations, they are available on the Senior Leadership Opportunity website, which is where the VITAs are posted. So thank you, Marquita, and you have a great day. I know you have a busy day, and thank you everyone for joining us on this very cold day in North Texas.
Thank you all. Thank you.